Alright, so here's what I'm gonna do. Instead of choosing just random movies I think are underrated in no particular kind of order, I decided that the format I want to do this in is choosing one movie from every year that I've been alive that I think is very
That's pretty
underrated.
good.
So, let's start with from 1997. I chose Mouse Hunt, which is a comedy about two guys living in this house that was passed down to them. But there's one thing, there's this fucking beyond intelligent mouse living there that outwits them in basically every single way possible. And one of the guys, when I was watching it, I was like, wow, he sounds so familiar. And it turns out he's the voice of Snowbell from Stuart Little, which is the greatest thing ever. And I mean, come on, it has Christopher Walken. So if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it. And I'll give it a clean 7 out of 10. 1998, I chose The Parent Trap, which I don't think is very underrated in popularity. I think a lot of people know about this movie and like this movie, but I kind of feel like a lot of people forget just how good this movie fucking is. Every time I watch it, I'm like, yo, this is damn near a masterpiece. And the fact that this is the first movie that Lindsay Lohan even made, it's pretty impressive. I still think it's her best movie she's ever made. And don't get me wrong, she do got a lot of bangers afterwards. Dennis Quaid, we got Dennis Quaid. But yeah, it's just such a great ass premise, such a great ass movie. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. 1999 is the first animated choice, which is South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut. And as someone who doesn't really care for musicals, this is easily my favorite musical of all time because it's basically a satire of musicals. It kind of started the pop culture relevancy of South Park in general. South Park has probably become my favorite like adult humor show of all time. And it all started with this one great movie that I will give a 7.5 out of 10. The year 2000, we saw not just one of the most underrated movies of the year, but probably the most underrated Disney movie ever made, which is an extremely goofy movie, which I seem to be the minority of thinking is far superior than the first Goofy movie, but I think this movie just hits way better in every aspect from the actual animation to the comedy, and the villain, Bradley Uppercrust, is just fucking hilarious, and I would say is deserving of a 7.5 out of 10. 2001, we see the third straight animated pick with Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. A movie so good that it spawned an entire Nickelodeon TV show that ran for like, I don't know, 3 to 4 years, maybe 5. And for whatever reason, even though I love the show never quite got to the level of this movie. This movie is definitely the peak of Jimmy Neutron. And just the idea of like these kids running wild on a city that got abducted by aliens was just super sweet. So I'm sure a lot of people have seen this, but it's probably kind of underrated because I don't think a lot of people go back and watch it as much as they should. And this will also be getting a 7.5. Now, 2002, we got a movie that isn't just the most underrated movie of the year, but the most underrated movie possibly of all time when it comes to action movies, and that's The Scorpion King. For whatever reason, I seem to be the only person that praises this movie to no end. Like, I will continue to praise this movie. I just think this is the greatest movie The Rock has ever made, one of the greatest 2000s action movies ever made. And it's just like the top tier fucking over the top machismo ass movie. I mean, if you like the Mummy movies, then I feel like there's no reason for you not to like this movie. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. 2003, we got Johnny English. It's almost like a less popular Austin Powers, because I feel like if it got as mainstream as Austin Powers, it would be absolutely beloved, because I think it's maybe even slightly funnier than Austin Powers, with the same premise of making fun of like James Bond and spy movies. So if you like Austin Powers, definitely check this shit out, and I'm gonna give it a 7.5. Now, 2004 is a little tricky. I actually don't know if this movie is well known or if it's popular or not. I chose Troy. Now, I don't know if I was just late to the party on this one. Do a lot of people love this movie? I have no idea. But if it's not that popular, then I would say it's definitely really fun movie to watch. It's definitely Hollywoodized, I would say. It's a little more glamorous than it actually would be if it was more realistic. Plus, we have Brad Pitt as Achilles. Like, that shit was sweet. But I feel like it gets overshadowed by movies like 300. And I would say this is probably on par with 300. It's probably even better. And it will also be getting a 7.5. 2005, I chose Are We There Yet? A fucking road trip comedy movie with Ice Cube. Like, what's not to like? We got the reunion of Ice Cube and Nia Long from Friday, and I just really loved this movie growing up, and I still think it's pretty solid. I rewatched it like maybe a little less than a year ago, and I still like it. So if you're just in the mood for any kind of like family comedy, then this is definitely a solid pick. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. And just like with the Scorpion King, I might be the only fan of this movie, and for 2006 I chose The Marine, starring John Cena, and again, it's John Cena's first role. Is the acting good? Not really, but the fucking action is pretty solid, and it's just super nostalgic for me. And we even got an old man T-1000 just stealing diamonds and shit. So if you're ever looking to just turn your brain off and watch a really dumb action movie, The Marine is a top pick for you, and it also gets a 7 out of 10. Now, 2007 is not tainted by nostalgia, because this is just genuinely a good-ass movie, and that's Surf's Up. And I don't only like this movie because it's about penguins, and penguins are my favorite animal. It's just really a sweet-ass movie about surfing, using an animation style that was perfect for the time, and still holds up now. And again, I think this is another one of those movies where a lot of people know it, and kinda remember it, but just hasn't watched it in like a decade. So I would definitely say you'd have to watch it again to really appreciate it, and I'll give it a 7.5. 2008, I chose a movie that is apparently one of the most hated movies of all time, and that's The Love Guru. For whatever reason, I think this movie is hilarious. Even with time passing, I still think this movie is hilarious. Is it stupid? Of course it's stupid. It's a fucking slapstick parody movie with Mike Myers. But if you're looking to find out why it's considered one of the worst movies of all time, and why I would consider it underrated, check that shit out, and I'll give it a 7 out of 10. 2009, I chose Obsessed, which looking back at the list of movies, I was like, wow, 2009 was not a good year for movies. It was basically just Idris Elba being blackmailed by some white chick secretary trying to become like his mistress. I just really liked it back in the day. I don't know if you like Beyonce, then Beyonce's in this, so check it out. 7 out of 10. 2010, I went ahead and chose Tron. This movie is just very aesthetically pleasing to look at. Just the neon blue everywhere is pretty sweet. The plot of a rebellious dude just looking for his dad is pretty generic, but if you like a CGI Jeff Bridges, then I'm sure you'll enjoy it. 7 out of 10. 2011, I'm going with Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And as someone who likes the entire trilogy, I would still think this first one was always the best of the three, as a origin story to how Caesar became such an intelligent ape. So yeah, this was always just the most interesting one of the three for me. If you haven't watched it in like a decade, definitely check it out again. I guarantee you will enjoy it. And it gets a 7.5. 2012, I chose Seven Psychopaths, a comedy where it's kind of like this writer trying to write a story titled Seven Psychopaths based on actual characters that are in his world of people's experiences with murder and just like weird situations. I don't know, it's just a really funny movie with like a really stellar cast. Again, if you like Christopher Walken, you're gonna like this movie. And I'll give it a 7.5. 2013, I got Pain and Gain, a Michael Bay movie that's very Michael Bay when it comes to it being overly saturated and all that shit. Aside from the Michael Bay part of it, I really enjoy this movie just because it's basically a heist movie, but with bodybuilders that are very inexperienced in pulling something like this off, trying to steal like basically this rich dude's entire life, and apparently this whole thing actually happened based on a true story that happened in like the 90s, I think. I just think it really worked out for a really good comedy. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. 2014, I've got The Voices, starring Ryan Reynolds, where he plays a mentally ill person who can hear voices through the mouths of his dog and cat, which is just really funny. For some reason, the cat's Scottish, and for whatever reason, the cat always tells him that he should kill people. So he does, but he disguises his murders as dates, and it just ended up being way better than I thought it was going to be. And I'll give it a 7.5. 2015, I've got Krampus, the most underrated Christmas movie ever made, with a solid cast, perfect prosthetics and overall practical effects, and just really great comedic moments. So if you like Christmas and you like comedy and you like horror, this is the fucking movie for you. And typically for a Christmas movie, I would give it a 9, but just as an overall movie compared to any other movie, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. 2016, I got Nocturnal Animals. Basically a movie about a story within a story where it's a woman that was sent a book or like a screenplay written by her ex that she ends up reading, and while she's reading it, we get sucked into the story, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, which is one of the best actors of the past decade. So basically if you like dramas, you'll fucking love this movie. I'll give it a 7.5. 2017, I got The Wall. Pretty simple movie. Two guys in war in Afghanistan. One played by John Cena, one played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. And they're hiding behind this little wall in the middle of nowhere, being sniped at by some random guy that we never actually see. We just hear his voice through a walkie-talkie. Super simple, and just an overall good time to watch. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. 2018, I got Under the Silver Lake starring Andrew Garfield. And this is one of those movies that's really hard to describe because it's kind of just all over the place. This dude trying to figure out answers to what seems to be the Illuminati, and whether you actually understand it at the end or not doesn't really matter. It's just entertaining as fuck. I'll give it a 7.5. 2019, we got another Christmas movie in Klaus, basically an origin story to Santa Claus, except they call him Klaus, and he's just this big white dude voiced by J.K. Simmons, and essentially he's just a toy maker that decided, hey, let's give my fucking toys away to these kids because my wife died, and if you haven't seen it, then fucking watch it, preferably around Christmas. And I will give it a 7.5. 2020 was a year of dog shit, including movies. There wasn't a whole lot of movies to choose from, but I'm going with Hulu original Palm Springs, which does the Groundhog Day gimmick of repeating the same day over and over. Andy Samberg is aware of this and has been doing this for a long time, and he fucking hates it, but grew to just kind of get used to it, and it's just a really good comedy. And again, it has J.K. Simmons, so I'll give it a 7.5. 2021, Vacation Friends. A very pleasant surprise of a comedy movie was a couple goes onto a resort vacation on one of the popular islands where they meet this coked up couple with John Cena and friends. And then when they think that it's just a one night fling, turns out it's not, because then the group comes and like tracks them down, end up kind of fucking up their life, but not really, which I'm just not really doing it justice. You'd have to watch it. And I will give it a 7.5. It's a lot of movies, a lot of years. Hope you enjoyed. Alright, I'm done.